Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Lynda, and I'm originally from Michigan, now living in the St. Louis metro area. I'm a college coach with School Match for You and have a daughter at University of Chicago.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy has a bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and a master's degree from North Carolina State University. She works in private practice in Raleigh as a mental health therapist. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. This was an amazing week for us. First of all, Karis and Joy were in from Durham for 5 days. And I can't even remember when we last had Christmas, like just with our family. We're always with grandma or something. It was just nice. And now my brother Norm, who's my best friend, is here for an entire week from Denver, Colorado. So I'm super, super happy and pumped up. But I have to say, Happy New Year. 2024 is here. Friends, let's make it our best year ever. Let's try to keep our New Year's resolutions. I'm going to try to up my exercise game. Nothing hardcore, but more than just the gardening. I enjoy walking just in our neighborhood, to be honest. 900-person development is pretty big. It's pretty hilly. It's got 6 lakes, and I just like walking in the nature amongst the lakes with the hills and the beautiful trees. And I'd like to get to doing 45 minutes a day, at least 4 times a week. So that's my New Year's resolution. Now, friends, I was going to talk about 990 forms and how to glean insights from college financial statements, just in light of the 2 questions we had last week. But it's FAFSA day. That's right. Got to call it audible. The Simplified FAFSA, the new FAFSA, it's out today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about FAFSA. Then I'm going to talk about early decision. Why do some colleges love early decision and others would never, ever implement it? Insights on early decision. And then we'll continue with Lynda's interview with Sue Campbell, understanding how Zeemee helps a student to understand the school culture and connect with other students. All right, but let's dive right in. So, a few weeks ago, friends, on our Thursday episode, I shared a couple recommended resources related to FAFSA. And I know what it's like. You're driving your car, you're walking your dog, you're at the gym, you're listening to the podcast, you're multitasking. That's why podcasts are so great, right? You know, you hear the recommended resources in one ear, out the other, or you don't write them down. You never ever look them up. But I am very bullish on walkthrough videos for both the CSS profile, FAFSA, and other sources as well. So with these walkthrough videos, they literally take you question by question through the document. And you have it open, and you stop and start. And that's what I recommend for completing the FAFSA. Now, if you don't have your FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID, you're going to need to get that. And you can just get that just by going to studentaid.gov and requesting the FSA ID. I should have mentioned that a while ago because it can take up to 3 days. But student and parent will need it. And depending on your family situation, in some cases, both parents will need it. But you can read about that when you go to FSA ID on studentaid.gov. But go ahead and get your FSA ID if you don't have it yet. If you are going to complete the FAFSA. But as far as completing the FAFSA, and I've said this before, but I recognize not everybody hears every episode. In some ways, the ideal way to do it is student and parent because it's in the student's name and they're the one that's going to get the benefits of, completing the FAFSA. So they really should be a part of the process, but it's all parent financial information, almost all of it. It's not something the student really can fill out without access to things like W-2s and tax returns and income information on assets. So ideal is parent and student, but I certainly understand a parent saying, I don't want my kid to know all my financial stuff. That's out. So my second choice is parent only. You're just going to have to let the student know, listen, this is in your name. This may result in a student loan. Of course, just completing the FAFSA doesn't mean you take out a loan, but it can make you eligible for that. And just you need to keep the student in the loop, even if the parent is doing it by themselves. So either of those two options I'm cool with. I'm just not a fan of students doing it by themselves. I certainly have worked with students who have done that by themselves. They need to get access to some of their parents' financial information. In some ways, I respect students that do that well because we talk about taking ownership of the process, but it's just too risky. It's too fraught with error. So once again, either parent and student or student only. But these two walkthrough videos, let's get back to that. Sorry, I got sidetracked there. That we recommended a few weeks ago, and I want to just reaffirm them again, are the Kentucky Higher Educational Assistant Authority walkthrough video and Best College Aid USA. Now, there are other good ones as well. Those are just a couple that I've pre-screened this year. In the past 3 or 4 years, I've always shared with you one from Utah, from their higher ed authority. They do a great job as well. I just thought the Kentucky one was really good this year. I wanted to watch a few so I could give you some recommended resources, having previewed them myself. So how do you find them? You just go to YouTube and just put in FAFSA walkthrough 2024, 2025. If you just put that in, actually, the Kentucky Higher Educational Assistance Authority, KHEAA, and Best College Aid USA, they'll both be on the first page, amongst others. And stop and start. Let's get this bad boy done. I was looking at a school earlier today, actually, Miami University in Ohio. They've got a FAFSA deadline of February 1st. So you don't want to play around with this puppy. You want to get it done. I recommend that you get this thing done by the 15th of January. It doesn't have to be, New Year's Day. I got a slave over it, but get it done within the first 2 weeks of January. And remember, normally it opens October 1st. This is just an aberration. So a question I often get is, do I have to complete the FAFSA? In fact, I really could have made this a question from a listener. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question. So the answer is no. You don't have to complete the FAFSA especially if you are expecting to pay full sticker price. Although you should know that increasingly more states are requiring FAFSA completion for graduation. More started in Louisiana, and more states have been adding. Last I knew, 7 states were requiring the FAFSA. So you may need to do it for high school graduation, depending on where you live. It was just a way of ensuring that more students get access to federal aid. Is you got to make something mandatory. It doesn't get done. Now, there are a few reasons you may want to consider doing it, besides the fact that your state may require it. A small number of schools require FAFSA completion for merit aid as well as need-based. So at a minimum, you want to check the schools on your students list to see if any of them are requiring FAFSA completion. Secondly, some schools have policies like if you don't complete it when you apply, you can't ever get aid, or you can't get it for 2 years, or you have to wait a year if unforeseen circumstances occur and you think I can pay now, but you find out you can't. And I've certainly seen that happen before with students, families I've worked with, where there's a loss of job or a change of jobs, and now family went to they thought, well, I didn't apply for aid because I didn't need to. Now they went to apply, and they were told, well, you didn't do it initially. This is particularly true at need-aware schools. Tends to be more true with private need-aware schools, that they may say, well, we admitted you need-aware, so you're going to have to wait a year or wait 2 years, or in some cases, you can't ever apply if you don't apply initially. So that's one reason you might want to consider it. Another reason is skin in the game. So you can't get the federal direct student loan unless you complete the FAFSA. And that loan is as good a loan as you'll find in most instances that's out there. I really like the loan because it's a fixed rate. It's a low fixed rate. No cosigner on the part of the parent, so you're not putting your assets at risk. No credit check. Okay, flexible repayment plans, deferment and forbearance, potential for loan forgiveness. Those are all reasons. But in addition to all of those reasons, skin in the game. So there's a lot of research that shows that students take on more responsibilities, such as modest loans or requirement that they work and use some of their proceeds from the work to pay for some of the cost of college, graduate at a higher rate. And so it's something to consider. I've also had some students and parents decide, you know what, you're going to take out the student loan to build your credit up. And in fact, I had one family, they took out the loan for $1,000 just to establish some credit history. Now, the student needs to actually be making payments during the time they're in school, which you don't have to do. That's the way to really drive up your credit score. So there can be other reasons to do it, but it's important to understand something philosophically, and that is that paying for college is assumed to be a joint responsibility between students and parents. That's the assumption. Parents are expected to either use their college savings, whether they have, there's different savings plans out there, 529 being the most popular, or they're just extra money, if there is any extra money left over, the overage every month from your income. If there's a little bit of overage over a month, let's say your expenses come to $5,000 a month, and your net income, is $7,000. And so you're expected to use some of that $7,000 between difference between expenses and income toward the cost of college. So parents are expected to pay the majority because they have more income and assets, but students are expected to do their fair share. And that is assumed will be the federal direct student loan. I'm not a fan of private loans, and I'm not a fan of Parent Plus loans, but I do like the federal direct student loan. And just so you know, in our family, I had both my kids take out the federal direct student loan. And I'm not saying you have to do this, but as long as they worked hard, which they both did, then I said, I'll pay 80% of it, and you can pay 20% at graduation. Karis only took out 10 grand, so it was a small amount, like $2,500 a year, but some skin in the game, and she supercharged her credit score too. So there are some reasons to do it, even if you don't qualify for financial aid or not expecting to get it, that you might want to consider. Now, the interest rate is a little higher now than it was. Like, it's currently 5.5% for both the unsubsidized and the subsidized version. I remember when Karis got hers, it was 2.65%, which is a little bit better than 5.5. But, the total over $10,000, if you take the whole total amount, and of course it's less if you're paying some of that down, but 2.65% is like minuscule. I mean, really, you're talking $262. It's not a lot of interest. But one thing that you should know is anybody can get an unsubsidized loan. Bill Gates, you think of the people that you might think of as wealthy, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, their kids could get an unsubsidized loan. There are no income caps. Now, the subsidized loan, you do need to qualify for financial aid. There needs to be your financial need. Your assets and income cannot generate a student aid index that's larger than the cost of attendance. And you get the subsidized loan. You can get the unsubsidized. What's the difference? With the subsidized, the government carries the interest for you, and your interest is not accruing while you're in college. Still, either one, those are two really great loans. But I don't want to get too much in the weeds there and get caught up and get distracted. But go ahead, complete the FAFSA, get it done, use those walkthrough videos, and there's going to be some kinks probably because we're moving to the Simplified FAFSA, and you're talking about going from I want to say there was 110 questions before to 46. Big difference using skip logic. There are a lot of changes. We've talked about them before. I had Mark Kantrowitz on to go over the details and changes in the FAFSA. I'm planning on having somebody else come on just because there's been some more changes since he did that. We did that interview, and the conversation with a few people right now concerning that. So let's transition to our next topic of the day, early decision. All right. Why is something that is so incredibly valuable to a small subset of colleges not used by the majority of colleges? So we're going to tackle today. Here's a stat that may surprise you depending on where you're coming from. Did you know that more than 95% of college students who enroll in college enroll through a plan other than early decision? That's right. Less than 5% of students go to college using early decision. But when I worked with some students from some of the New York elite private day schools, their counselors advised their families have your early decision 1 and your early decision 2 ready to go. So in other parts of the country and for other schools, it's a huge decision of whether you apply ED or where you apply ED, or do you apply ED2, which is a second round. So I want to start today by just talking about why is it that some colleges are against early decision, don't offer it, don't ever plan to offer it. And then for other schools, it's an incredibly important way that they bring in their class. All right, let's start with the why not. Well, for a lot of schools, they will say that it's not equitable. What does that mean? Well, early decision means you're making a binding commitment to a school. If you're admitted through an early decision program, you have to withdraw your applications from other schools and commit before you get the ability to see the financial aid offers that would have come from the other schools. So particularly public schools that are getting public dollars and the whole public is contributing because state taxes, are one of the ways these schools are funded. So they feel like the whole entire state is funding our school, and we're having a plan that caters to well-resourced families that don't need to compare financial aid offers. That's not fair. In fact, amongst flagship schools in the country, only the University of Virginia and the University of Vermont are the only schools that offer early decision binding program. Now, there's some other public schools. There's a SUNY Public. There's Miami University. A few others that do, quite a few in the state of Virginia, but still, it's pretty rare with publics. And like I said, even those flagships like UVA just implemented it in 2019, and this is the first year Vermont has had it. So it's quite rare. So that's going to be what most public schools are going to say. It's not equitable. It favors well-resourced families, and we're getting tax dollars from everybody, and we have a mission to serve everybody. So that's one thing why they don't. A second reason, that you'll oftentimes hear is that students are not ready to make a decision by November 1st or November 15th. In effect, they're committing in October, really, because, a lot of counselors require you to have this all into them, well before the deadline. And November 1 is the most common deadline. There's some counselors that require you to have this stuff to them by October 1 because, they have to do their part. They need to know it impacts a lot of other decisions on their part. So a lot of schools feel like that's just not fair. A student is not mature enough yet. They are not likely to know enough to be willing to make a commitment. And that may mean not know the school well enough or know all their options. So it's just not fair to expect a student to make a binding commitment at the very start of their senior year. And they may not like it because they might think it may lead to bad decisions on the part of the student that just have deleterious effects. So that's another reason why you'll hear people say they're not in favor of early decision. Now, there's a third group that would love to offer ED, but they don't have the brand strength in the marketplace. So it would be embarrassing for them to offer a plan and hardly anybody applies and uses it because I'll be honest, it's really hard to get a student to commit early decision. School Match for You is a company I founded. We have a multi-counselor practice. We typically have 30 kids or so that will apply early decision each year. And it always amazes me when I look back and every year I see some of the biggest brand names in the country and no one applies ED in the year. It's just too much competition out there. Because not only do you have to have somebody make a binding commitment and not compare financial aid offers or not get to visit all their schools. That's in some things. Sometimes it's not even about the money. It's like, I haven't had a chance to visit all these schools. How do I know I really like this school more than that school? In addition to that, you have to beat out all the competition. There's a lot of competition. So every year, like this, the first year, I think in the last 10 or 12. I didn't have a single student apply early decision at the University of Pennsylvania. And I mean, that's just, of course, I used to live there for 14 years. So that's always been a school. But no, it's just really competitive. So it's tough. So some schools are like, why would we do this? And we get like 31 people use that plan, or 14 people or 70 people. It's just not worth implementing a whole different system of applying. Now let's talk about why schools love it, because there's a certain subsection of the country that absolutely loves it and would not be able to do admissions the way they can without it. So, well, first of all, I want to bust a myth. So this is just my opinion, but I do feel pretty strongly about it. So oftentimes when I'm talking with students and parents, they feel the primary reason why schools have early decision is so they can make themselves look more selective. Now, this is how this works. Let's say you bring in 1,000 people in your freshman class, okay? Well, if you can fill up half the class, 500 spots in the early round, then when the overwhelming masses apply for those last 500 spots, you're going to have a super low admit rate. That's how they build their brand. That's how they build their selectivity. And then on and on and on. Lots of things happen with that, right? The more brand strength you have, the more donors are willing to give. The more brand strength you have, the more you're going to increase your yield, because people will feel an honor. Wow, I got in this school. The more brand strength you have, just a number of things happen. Even your bond ratings can improve. So I'm not going to go over the benefits that happen with having a better brand strength. You can attract a higher caliber student, can get wins that you would never have before. Now, this is definitely true. All these things are true, and they are a benefit that schools that have ED programs receive. But I just do not believe it's the primary reason. I think it's a secondary reason. Once again, they're not naive. They know it will drive down their admit rates, and that will help build brand strength. But in my opinion, the number one reason is something different. And I'm going to give you an analogy, and hopefully this will resonate. Suppose on your job, you have your direct report, you have your boss. But let's say there's another like 12 VPs in the company that in some way you indirectly report to. Any of those 12 could make life really tough for you if they were not happy with your job performance. But let's say if you did this one thing, not only would it significantly increase the chance that they would be happy with your performance, but it would also make your job so much easier to do. I know what you're thinking. Well, that's a no-brainer. If it's not unethical, why would I not do it? I believe that's the number one reason why schools offer ED. It's to increase the chance that they're able to keep all the stakeholders happy with them and the job that they're doing. Now, it doesn't guarantee they're going to be happy, but it can increase the chances that they're happy, in some ways rather significantly. So some of you are thinking, well, who are you talking about? So let me just share some of the people who have a very vested interest in what the composition of the class is that the admissions team brings in. The board of trustees, you absolutely better believe they care. So that's VP number 1. VP number 2, the president of the university. VP number 3, the provost, the chief academic officer. That's what the provost says, chief academic officer. And in many schools, that's the direct report. That's the direct boss. Not all, but in many. I once had Eric Furta on, former director of admission at UPenn, and we had this conversation about who does the admission officer actually report to, the VP of enrollment? And he said, that's actually a complicated question because there's quite a few different people you may report to depending on the school structure. All right, VP number 4, the financial aid director. Do you think the financial director is concerned with hitting net tuition targets? A lot of people go into financial aid to help needy families. The more you're able to secure your budget up front, then you're able to help more people in the regular round. And that can be one of the things that can keep financial aid officers happy, enjoying their job. Number 5, VP, alumni. You think they're watching their institution, watching how it's trending? Is it getting better in their opinion or not? Remember, nobody is really impressed with most schools just because you're full. In most schools, just because you're full, you're not impressed. They're going to say, well, who did you fill with? And there's going to be a qualitative metrics, and depending on the background, you're going to look for different things. For example, number 6 VP, coaches. Don't you think coaches want to secure talent? And athletic directors, I could throw that in. Absolutely. And so early decision, it greatly enables the ability of a coach to know that they're going to have talent. VP number 7, anybody involved in performing arts leadership. That could be the orchestra, theater, and others. VP number 8, current parents. Current parents care about what they feel the composition of the student body is. VP number 9, current students, they care. VP 10, prospective parents. VP 11, prospective students. And then I mentioned this earlier, the bonding agencies. So there's 3 bonding agencies, okay, that rank schools. And they look at things like the composition of the student body and acceptance rates and sometimes even rankings play a role in the bond rating, which means you can get loans at a lower rate. So you've got S&P Global. They're founded in 1860. All 3 of these bonding agencies are over 100 years old. Moody's is the other big one. They're founded in 1909, and then Fitch, 1913. So they care. And there's others too. I could say the VP of Residential Life, they care. Okay, are the dorms going to be over-enrolled this year? We have to go to triples, and we're going to have to use alternative housing, like renting hotels because we over-enrolled. And what kind of conversations are we going to be having with parents and students about this? So that's just some of the people who care. Now, some people care about the numbers for different reasons. Some care about things like acceptance rates and SAT scores. Some care about things like full pay families and net tuition revenue. Some care about talent in the areas of interest like coaches or performing arts. Some care about various aspects of compositional diversity, like the number of first-gen students or Pell Grant recipients, or do we get more kids from this state or this region of the country, or more rural kids or students of color or international diversity. Or did we admit too many comp sci majors? Are our classes going to be too large? Did we over-enroll the dorms? So if all the people that you answer to or that are holding you accountable in some way, if you have a better chance of being able to do that because you can lock people in, that's going to be very appealing. And that's why a lot of schools with the strongest brands offer this. And then furthermore, if you can fill half your class up or a big portion of your class, a third even, in the early round, it's just going to make your job so much easier. That's going to lead to your admission staff being less stressed out, which can decrease turnover. So those are some of the reasons why schools have it. Now, let me give you some stats on early decision. There are actually 17 states that don't have ED at all. At all. Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Kansas, Mississippi, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Not a single school in any of those 17 states has an early decision plan. Now, that's not necessarily because the whole entire state's against it. It's more a function of very few public schools offer it. And, the private schools in those states, generally, the number one thing is they wouldn't necessarily feel they have the brand strength to be able to offer that program and get very many people to commit. All right, here's another stat for you. There are 181 colleges that offer early decision. Now, I literally went through and counted them one by one. So that's my counting. Maybe I'm off by 1 or 2, but that's very, very close. I think I mistakenly said on another episode there are 275. If I did, that's in the back of my mind. I apologize for that. And of the 181, 101 offer 2 rounds of early decision. So you have your first round, November 1st, November 15th, typically November 1 being the most common. And then your second round, somewhere between January 1 and February 1, January 1st to 15th being most common. So here's a question. If some schools are absolutely against it, some are for it in a major big way, how do you know if ED is a big factor in admissions? Despite whether or not a school is telling you it's not, or it's not that big of a deal. Well, the good news is more and more schools are just coming out and just being honest and saying, yeah, there is an advantage to applying early decision. 20 years ago, that didn't happen as much. But now, there's a lot more transparency coming out of the admission offices about just acknowledging it. But here are 4 tests to ask yourself, does the school put a big emphasis on early decision? And by the way, if if any of these boxes are checked, the answer would be yes, in my opinion. So it's not like if you go 4 for 4, okay, if you go 4 for 4, then the school values ED. If you go 3 for 4, no. If you go 1 out of 4, then they value ED. But generally speaking, you can just assume if a school has early decision, it's important to them. It's a hassle to have a separate round of admissions unless it's going to bring you value. So generally work off of the assumption if they offer it, it's important. But here are 4 tests. First is, do they have 2 rounds? If it's a hassle to have 1 round, you know it's a hassle to have 2 rounds. I don't mean to say it's a hassle because I just gave you a bunch of beneficial ways, things that accrue to an institution that, in terms of pleasing stakeholders. What I mean is anytime you make your process more complex, that there's certain difficulties or challenges that come with that. Now, you wouldn't do it unless the benefits outweighed the drawbacks. That's all I'm saying. So do they offer 2 rounds? Now, of the 181, there are 101 that offer 2 rounds. So the majority of schools that have ED have 2 rounds of early decision. And there's no way in the world a school is going to have 2 rounds of early decision unless they find it to be very valuable. And this is one of my pet peeves, is when schools that offer early decision say we don't use demonstrated interest, when the ultimate demonstrated interest is, do you have an early decision process? And then some of them have 2 rounds. So of course they value demonstrated interest. Like Matt Bonser said in my interview with him from Colorado College, that is the 10 out of 10. You want to know 10 out of 10 when it comes to demonstrated interest? Apply ED. That's the ultimate trump card, telling a school, yeah, I'm interested in you. I'm willing to make a binding commitment. Second test to know whether ED is valuable. Do you take more than a third of your class through early decision? You take more than a third of your class. Remember, the masses will always apply in the non-binding way, whether that's early action. Some schools have ED, NEA, most don't, but some do, or regular admissions. The masses are always going to come through in a non-binding way. And that's true for many reasons. They need to compare financial aid offers. They can't commit without doing that. They haven't been able to get to many schools. They're not comfortable committing without getting to many schools. Or they just aren't able to get all the pieces of the application done in time to meet these early deadlines. So the masses will always apply through regular or early action in a non-binding way. So if you see more than a third of the class coming in ED, that's a telltale sign. Third, is the early decision acceptance rate twice as high as the regular admission acceptance rate? Now, it's tricky comparing ED acceptance rates to regular rates for multiple reasons. One, athletes come in through the ED process. 2, in general, some of the strongest applicants will come through the ED process. These are coming from well-resourced families, well-resourced schools, and they've been preparing for their whole life for this. So a lot of the strongest applicants do apply in ED and athletes. So you can't just necessarily say, this school has 3 times higher acceptance rate ED, so it's 3 times easier getting in. No, but there absolutely is a material beneficial advantage, even if you were to pull out athletes and you were to have exact same similar profiles of students. So if the ED acceptance rate is twice as high as regular, that's a telltale sign. All right. Next question. Next test. Does the school offer incentives if you apply ED? In other podcasts, we've talked about Denver with their $5,000 guaranteed scholarship. Not total scholarship, just ED scholarship if you apply ED. St. Olaf guaranteeing $20,000. These are new developments. We also talked about High Point offering free grad school to 8 to 10 of their programs. So does the school offer incentives? That's a telltale sign. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, where am I going to get some of this information from? You can just Google this. There's a couple independent educational consultants, Jeff Levy and Jenny Kent, and they go through Common Data Set every year and provide a great free resource. You can just Google, Jeff Levy, early decision, and it'll take you to a really helpful chart that he and Jenny Kent have provided. They do it every year. And I've, in fact, linked it a couple times on past episodes. But in that chart, you're able to see the percentage of the class that comes in ED, who offers ED, whether they have 1 round or 2 rounds of ED. And you can also see the acceptance rates for ED compared to regular. So that's the easiest source to get that. Otherwise, you're having to comb through the common data set and compare school by school. It's all directly out of there, but it's a lot of work, especially if you're comparing a lot of schools. All right, so who are these 181 colleges that offer early decision? Well, I am going to try to blow through this list as fast as I can, and I'm going to do it state by state because I want you to see the incredible difference that you see on a state-by-state basis when it comes to early decision. And I'm going to mention how many schools in each state offer it. So let's go and let's fly through this quickly. Alabama has only one. It's Birmingham Southern. California has 9. Claremont McKenna, Harvey Mudd, LMU Loyola Marymount, Occidental, Pitzer, Pomona, Santa Clara, Scripps, and the University of San Francisco. Colorado, only one school, Colorado College. Connecticut has 7. Connecticut College, Fairfield, Quinnipiac, Sacred Heart Trinity, University of New Haven, and Wesleyan. DC, American, Catholic, George Washington. Florida has 4, Flagler, Florida Southern, Rollins, and the University of Miami. Georgia has 3, Agnes Scott, Emory, and Spelman. Illinois has 5, Augustana, Lake Forest, Moody Bible Institute, Northwestern University, and University of Chicago. Indiana has 3, DePauw, that's DePauw, P-A-U-W, not DePaul in Chicago, they're often confused. St. Mary's and Wabash. Iowa has 1, Grinnell. Kentucky has 1, Center. Louisiana has 1, Tulane. Maine has 4, Bates, Bowdoin, Colby, and College of the Atlantic. Maryland has 5, Johns Hopkins, Micah, Maryland Institute College of Art, McDaniel, Salisbury, and Washington College. Massachusetts has a whopping 18. And guess what? That's not even the highest number. In fact, it's not even the second highest number. One thing you'll notice, friends, is ED is much more common on the East Coast than it is on the West Coast. Okay? So some of these really big numbers are East Coast schools. So 18, here we go. Amherst, Babson, Boston College, Bentley, BU, which is Boston University, Brandeis, Clark, College of the Holy Cross, Merrimack, Mount Holyoke, Northeastern Smith, Springfield, Stonehill, Tufts, Wellesley, Wheaton, and Williams. Michigan has 2, Hillsdale and Kalamazoo. Minnesota has 3, Carleton, McAllister, and St. Olaf. Missouri has 2, College, Cox, but only their nursing program, and Wash U in St. Louis. New Hampshire has 1, Dartmouth College. New Jersey has 4, College of New Jersey, Drew, Ramapo College, and Stevens Institute of Technology. And here we go for the big number, please. New York has 33. 33. We got the Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, Bard, Barnard, Clarkson, Colgate, Columbia, Cooper Union, Cornell, Fordham, Hamilton, Hartwick, Hobart, William and Smith, Ithaca, Jewish Theological Seminary, Manhattan College, Marist, Nazareth, NYU, RPI, Rensselaer Polytech, RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, Sarah Lawrence, Siena, Skidmore, John Fisher, St. Lawrence, SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, SUNY Maritime. Interesting how only 2 of the 63 SUNYs are on here, but they are. Syracuse University, Union, University of Rochester, Vassar, Webb, Wells College. All right. By the way, I'm taking this mostly from some research from Prep Scholar. Now, I didn't agree with everything on the list. For example, I found some schools that have early decision that were not on the list, so I supplemented it with just my own knowledge. North Carolina has 7, Davidson, Duke, Elon, High Point, Meredith, Wake Forest, and Warren Wilson. Ohio has 8, Case Western Reserve, Worcester, Denison, Kenyon, Miami University, Oberlin College, Ohio Wesleyan, and Wittenberg. Oregon has 2, Lewis and Clark and Reed. Pennsylvania has 20. Once again, these really big numbers. Massachusetts 18, New York in the 30s, and Pennsylvania 20. Allegheny, Bryn Mawr, Bucknell, Carnegie Mellon, Dickinson, Drexel, F&M, Franklin and Marshall, Gettysburg, Grove City, Haverford, Juniata, Lafayette, Lehigh, Lycoming, Muhlenberg, Susquehanna, Swarthmore, UPenn, Ursinus, and Washington and Jefferson. Rhode Island has 4, Brown, Bryant, Providence, and RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. South Carolina has 2, Furman and Wofford. Tennessee has 3, Rhodes, Sewanee, and Vanderbilt. Texas has 5, Austin College, Rice University, SMU, Southern Methodist University, TCU, Texas Christian University, and Trinity. And Vermont has 4, Bennington, Champlain, Middlebury, and University of Vermont. Virginia has 11, 6 of which are public, by the way, very unusual. Christopher Newport, College of William and Mary, Hampton Sydney, Hollins, Lynchburg, Roanoke, University of Richmond, UVA, VMI, Virginia Military Institute, and Washington and Lee. Washington has 2, Puget Sound and Whitman, and Wisconsin has 2, Beloit and Lawrence. So, what are my thoughts on early decision? Finally, do I think that early decision is unethical? Do I think that early decision programs should be abandoned? It's a big debate because there's no doubt about the fact that it would advantage families that are less resourced if early decision programs were to go away. And I've always been an access guy. I worked for almost 14 years, 13 years and 9 months at an access organization that helped bridge the gap between well-resourced and under-resourced students. Having said all that, I am not of the belief that early decision should be abandoned. And that's for a couple reasons. One is I'm just not comfortable being heavy-handed in telling a college how to manage their own school. I think they can make that decision themselves, and consumers can decide whether they're interested in what the college has to offer. And then secondly, I think that it would lead to a whole underground system because schools have to be able to predict yield. And I think it would just lead to them recruiting more from private schools where the counselor can help give them a little coaching about what students they might be likely to yield. And they can pick up cues, even if it's subtle. So I just feel like let's let schools do what they need to do. Let's respect how difficult it is when kids are, we're caught in this cycle right now. Let's be honest. People are saying, gee, look how hard it is to get in these schools. I better throw 5 to 7 more apps out there. And I was talking with the family I'm working with last week about this, and the family said, well, of course, the harder it is to get in. Of course, you're going to apply to more schools. And they said something that really made me think. They said, I just wish we could get rid of the Common App. I had to think, would I like that or not? Because on one hand, the Common Application does really make it easy to just add a bunch of schools when you've done most of the work. And there's no doubt about it that if you got rid of the Common App, you would reduce your applications. But on the other hand, the Common App makes it a lot easier in a lot of ways for counselors and for students. I hate it that places like Georgetown and MIT make you do their own application. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I kind of like the Common App, even that it does, no doubt about it, one of the main reasons why you have such a growth in applications and one of the reasons why acceptance rates are so much lower than they used to be as students are applying to more schools. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I didn't know if I wanted to blow through 181 names. Hopefully I didn't snooze you and put you off of sleep. The one exception to me is public schools. I'm just not cool. I'm just not down with public schools, public colleges who are paid for by public dollars from all income levels throughout the whole entire state, using the school to have a program that unapologetically favors well-resourced families. In fact, I want to read a quote to you from the VP of Enrollment at Virginia Tech, a public school that had offered early decision until 5 months ago when they dropped it. And this is a quote from Louisa Havens Gerardo, the Vice Provost of Enrollment Management. The discontinuation of the early decision plan and the use of legacy as a factor in admissions will allow us to improve the admission process to benefit all students.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, if you haven't heard part 1 and part 2 of Lynda's interview with Soup Campbell, you're going to want to go back and check out those segments. But in part 3, Lynda asked Soup if Zeemee is used by colleges as a demonstrated interest test. Soup lets us know if students join one Zeemee community or more than one. What metrics can colleges get from students who use the Zeemee community? Lynda asked Soup that question. Soup explains how bulk messaging works on Zeemee. Soup talks about how chat channels support students with affinity groups. Soup talks about whether Zeemee is available to students outside the U.S. Soup answers if international universities are on Zeemee. Soup talks about the type of students on Zeemee. Soup talks about the top 10 schools for engagement. And Soup talks about the live events that colleges host on Zeemee. Listen and enjoy.
There's so much going on the app, and so many colleges are tracking demonstrated interest. Are colleges seeing a Zeemee interaction as part of that demonstrated interest component?
Yeah, I think kind of yes and no, right? Like, I don't know that we have, and again, we're right now right around 200 colleges and universities who have officially partnered with Zeemee. I don't know of any one of those schools that are making admission decisions around what students are doing on the app. So I don't think it's really so much of that. I think what they're doing, again, by being able to see students and who's highly engaged, moderately engaged, things like that, I think they're leveraging those insights to know how to better reach out to the students that they feel are truly wanting to attend that school. So I think it's more about that versus let's watch what these students are doing and then use that as a means of deciding if they're a good fit or not. I've not seen that. I think it's more, all of those students, if they're in that school's community, that's the demonstrated interest right there. Again, if they've chose to follow that university, that's the demonstrated interest. Now it's of all those thousands of students that are following us on Zeemee, who are the ones that are really interested? Like, again, a high school senior right now on Zeemee, they're not just following one school. They might be in 5 or 6 different college university communities. Because again, that's the stage where they're at. They're trying to get a sense of which one of these schools is a real fit for me. Which one of these schools has the students that I feel like I really, belong to, fit with. So it's more so the colleges and universities trying to really assess of the students that are following them, who do we have the best option, the best chance at really reeling in, because they might be considering us, but they're also considering these other 2 schools and we really want them. So it's more about being able to really engage and build that relationship and really try to help that prospective student. Like, those colleges, they're thinking we want them to feel like they belong to us, oftentimes
Sure.
even before they apply. We want them to feel like they're a part of our community so early that when they do come to making that decision, how could they not choose us? Because they felt like they've been a part of us all these months. So it's more about that than kind of evaluating demonstrated interest and then making decisions around that.
So do the colleges, they obviously can see who is in their community. Do they get metrics on how much time that they've spent in that community, how many conversations they've been a part of?
Absolutely. Yes. And that goes back to, again, that stuff we can't get from Meta. That stuff, some of those, like, really getting into the weeds of just high level analytics and insights. And that's what the colleges are able to get. Now, one of the things we're not going to show them what direct messages were, but again, that's one that they can see. They can see even how many students in our community were direct messaging each other. Because again, like, that tells us something. That tells us these personal friendships are being made with students in our community. But yes, time and app, again, looking at different cohorts, we could spend 5 hours on just the amount of rich, useful data and insights that the colleges can tap into. Even again, being able to communicate, right? So I'll give you one example. There's a neat thing that our colleges and universities can do. It's called bulk messaging, right? Now, again, think of traditionally how colleges and universities have to try to communicate. It's primarily still email. We have a limited amount of information on the students, so really this stuff can't truly be personalized. Colleges on Zeemee can go into their dashboard where all of this analytics are. Because the students have shared their interest, all the things, they can in seconds craft like a direct message but it could be in mass, right? So that direct message is going to come from this admission counselor. I've selected some of these interests that are like computer science because I'm going to send a direct message to students, in our community. Or we saw all the students in our community that indicated they're into hiking and backpacking. Well, we've got a club on campus that's really huge and popular. So they could quickly filter, create that message, tap send. 317 students just got a direct message in their phone showcasing this really cool club on campus that we know they would be interested in because they've already said they love hiking and backpacking and camping. So again, that's a long answer to that, but there's just really neat ways that the colleges now can engage and communicate and reach out to these students because they know those things. And prior to that, you're just not able to communicate with them if you don't know those types of things that the students are interested in.
It's really granular kind of data that you're talking about, and I'm sure the schools love it. Which leads to the question: do you have discrete groups in there? So, is there a separate area for generic university for LGBTQ students, for rural students, for Hispanic students?
Yes. Thank you so much for asking that because I probably would have not even mentioned it. But so we've got this one cool thing on Zeemee, right? That's called the social Zeemees. And there are literally now hundreds of themed based, topic based chat channels. Again, these aren't affiliated with any specific college or university, but just students want to chat about all kinds of things. So our colleges don't really get involved in those. These are just for the students. And so I actually follow a lot of those because I just like to lurk in those channels. I mean, you even mentioned like we have the Black Students Forum. We do have an amazing LGBTQ chat. But we've got crazy stuff. Like there's a Swifties chat. There's like all of these just topics and
Of course, there
themes
is.
and yeah, there's first gen students. I love that chat channel. And listen, you're talking about a first gen chat channel. We call them chat channels, but this is a group chat. Listen, we're talking tens of thousands of first gen students from not just in the US, but really all around the world that can lean on each other in this one chat together and can support each other. And so I love those chat channels. And I think, again, Zeemee is a social platform. I like to describe it where students can find their people, right? And we have a lot of high school students at a lot of high schools. And if you're a student listening to this, you might feel like maybe this is you, where you might be sitting in a classroom at school and feel like there's really nobody else like me here in my school. And there's really no one else here that kind of identifies with me or has my background. On Zeemee, they're there. And you'll find them like in mass. And so for a lot of students, they would tell you, look, some of my closest friends are not who I'm sitting next to in my class at high school. My closest friend group are these students I met on Zeemee in this one chat channel because those are my people. I finally found a group of students that get me, that understand me. And so I love that. That to me is really powerful. And I want students to be able to find their people and even some of our colleges and universities. I always use, USC as an example. USC has done some really cool things on Zeemee, even around some of these demographic groups. So even within USC, they've created chat channels for their Black students, their, Latinx students and stuff. So, USC was like, hey, we want those students out there that fall in particular demographics to see and know that they have a place at the table here with us. And some of their current student influencers reflect that as well. And so I love that. That is a core aspect of Zeemee. And you're right, there's a lot of these other topic, theme-based places where students can gather and connect and build friendships and relationships with each other.
That's great. You mentioned international students. So the app is open to anyone, not just US students, correct?
That is correct. And so, I like to say Zeemee is pretty popular these days, but we've obviously not got popular enough yet where we're being banned in certain countries. So as of today, Zeemee is available to students in any country around the world. The last I checked, this has been several months back, but the last I checked and took a look at our user base, at that time, students on Zeemee represented 173 countries around the world. So this truly has become a global app. Now, most of our college partners right now are all US colleges and universities, but there are students on Zeemee from all around the world, which we love. But I will say the app is still all native English as far as language. So I think at some point down the road, as we continue to attract even more and more international students, I think it would be neat for us to kind of start to really build in alternate languages within the app so that students, even around the world can use the app in their own native language, which would be cool as well. So right now, all English, but yes, those students are still flocking to Zeemee and connecting. And many of our college partners will also set up dedicated, again, chat channels, but it's just a specific group chat for international prospective students because they want those international students to know you're not the only one from that country who's going to be here or who is thinking about us here. And we want you connecting with each other as well. So yes, there's definitely a rich flavor of international experience that students have on Zeemee.
So, do you have international schools, or are all the schools just U.S. based?
Yeah, right now, all US based. Again, there's just, there's some things I think where, as a company, we've not really made an effort yet, like a true kind of marketing outreach effort to kind of expand outside the US. And then there's hurdles, right? Like, so again, privacy laws in Europe, and things are different than what they are in the US. So there's a lot of like hurdles, I think, once you really start to have a social platform and you're going to start to really venture out outside the US. But I will say we're 100% open. I think there's a couple schools in Canada that we've got conversations going with right now, which, I mean, that obviously makes sense. I mean, if you're a school in Toronto, I mean, you're right here. You're right next to, all of these schools in the US and students here as well. So I could see in 2024 being the year we start to, for the first time, see some schools outside the US jump on this. And again, I talk to my friends in Europe and places, and a lot of schools in Europe, I mean, they want students from the US. They want internet, they want to tap into those students as well. And so what better way to reach them than on Zeemee when obviously the majority of the user base on the app's US students. So I think we will see that market grow in the future.
So, talk about the types of schools that are on the app. So, you mentioned USC. I know there are some community colleges on the app. So, it sounds like you really run the gamut.
Yes, it's there's really across the board, right? So we've got large flagship R1, public institutions on Zeemee, and we have got the tiny little private liberal arts school that, we've got community colleges. We have a law school on Zeemee. We've got several schools that now want their grad programs to have a space to do this type of thing as well. And the fascinating thing about this, right, is that no matter what the type of school, their prospective students want to connect with each other. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's UC Berkeley or USC or a tiny little school that maybe none of us have heard of. For the students considering those schools, they want to connect with each other long before they arrive on that campus. So earlier, when I mentioned those things like 2x on the applications and 3 to 4x on the yield and deposits and reducing melt, that actually has been consistent regardless of the institution type. That same thing happens for community colleges as it does for UC Berkeley, right? And some schools aren't worried about, trying to generate more applications and things, but we've seen that consistently happen regardless of the school type, because we just know all prospective students want to connect with each other and build those relationships. So it is exciting. I'll give you this real quick story. One of our former partners when we partnered with them, again, I mentioned how we sync up on data, right? And like we're going to start to send out those first invites. And I won't mention the partner's name, but this was just phenomenal. This was so funny when this happened. They actually sent us slightly incorrect data for that first big invite. And the students that we invited into their community, and this was going to be at the undergraduate level, were all of their prospective grad students. The community exploded. These perspectives, they were chatting nonstop. Like we couldn't believe what was happening. So it was so powerful that they actually said, we cannot shut this down. We in no way, like this was not what we were wanting to happen, but we cannot shut this down. All of our prospective grad students are connecting and chatting. So we set up an entire new kind of like landing spot for them on the app to then focus on the undergrad students. So a little bit of an oopsie there that happened, but turned out to be something really positive that they weren't even thinking about, their grad, programs at that time, but discovered we cannot shut this down. This is amazing. So yes, we've discovered that this works for all types of colleges and universities.
And I've noticed on your LinkedIn page that you list like the top 10 schools for engagement on the app. And they're not the schools that I would anticipate. It's not the giant flagship with 50,000 students. A lot of times it's a smaller school, and that was kind of surprising to me. So talk about schools and how did they get that kind of amazing engagement when it's a smaller population?
Yeah, so I can tell you exactly how this is happening. So again, what we're measuring there are kind of like the number of chat messages, really. Like that's kind of what we're measuring when we're doing that every Friday. Who were the top colleges and universities from the previous week that had the most activity and chat, engagement. So yes, I'm just like you. Like the assumption would be this is always going to be the Mississippi States, the Auburns, the Berkeleys, the USCs, the Indiana universities, just because of sheer volume. But one of the cool things that happens on Zeemee are colleges that are partnered with us from time to time are hosting these really fun live social chat events on the app. And so what I mean by that is they're picking like a designated night, like, hey, this Thursday night at 8 p.m. in our one chat channel that's called our live events chat channel, get ready because we're going to do a trivia night, or we're going to play a scavenger hunt game in the chat channel. We're going to do this real cool emoji translation game, and we're going to give out prizes and swag. So our colleges that are hosting those events generate a tremendous amount of engagement and chat from the students. And so typically when I see a school that I would think like, well, that's kind of a smaller school, 9 times out of 10 that previous week they hosted one of those events and just generated all that engagement. And just to that topic of these live social events on Zeemee and why they're so powerful, think of how most colleges and universities today do any type of virtual event with prospective students. It's usually always transactional information relay stuff like, hey, kids, get excited. Sign up for our financial aid webinar on the changes in FAFSA this year. Listen, that's important, right? That's really important, and we should sign up and attend those to get really important information. But let's be honest, I'm not walking away from that saying that was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. So on Zeemee, the colleges and universities on Zeemee have discovered if we do events that are just more social and relational, again, these events are allowing all of their prospective students to make connections with each other. That's really powerful, and they're fun, and they're building that affinity and that sense of belonging. And again, they're just helping reduce stress too. Like, again, we know our high school seniors, this is tough. This is a really scary time. And to know one night at 8 o'clock when I'm just sitting in my bedroom at home, like I could hop on Zeemee and meet all these other students and just kind of disconnect from the reality of kind of my senior year for a little bit, for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and have fun with these colleges and universities, really powerful, and they generate an enormous amount of engagement. So I think if I dug into the data, Lynda, I would say when we see some of those smaller schools that crack the top 10, they've probably been hosting some of those really cool live social chat events on Zeemee.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, because I was surprised at some of the schools that I saw on there.
Friends, this concludes part 3 of Lynda's interview with Soup Campbell. Hope you'll join us next week for the final part. Friends, on Thursday's episode, part 2 of the article Julie and I started discussing last week from College Vine. They're looking at deferrals and wait lists and how to write a letter of continued interest. You're going to want to tune in for that. And Lisa and I will discuss a question that came in from a mom from California, which is a really good question. Which schools are overlaps and competitors for each other? So we're going to take that question on. And we have a brand new interview I'm really excited about. It's our first mom and son interview. It's Dan and Mary LaChance from the great state of Connecticut. And they're going to be sharing with us the incredible opportunity that exists right now for students in the field of cybersecurity. And January's here, so that means college spotlights are back. And Lisa and Lynda will be discussing another underrated gem, Illinois Tech. And friends, I close you out with this. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. But it's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career trajectory. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Lynda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.